Eli Bar-Zeev once said the easiest thing to fake is courage, the hardest is a name. In 1970, a man calling himself David Avner walked into an Iranian government office with a folder full of fake Swiss charity documents and a letter of introduction signed by someone who didn't exist. He smiled, shook hands, and asked for permission to open a humanitarian mission in Khuzestan. No one questioned him. They only asked when his first shipment of volunteers would arrive. But he left the building that afternoon certain of only two things. One, the forged letter carried the wrong ministry seal. Two, his signature didn't match the one Mossad had on file for David Avner. He had built his entire legend on two mistakes that could expose him at any moment. But the operation could not wait. Jewish families in Iraq were disappearing nightly. Walk out your front door in Baghdad and you might never walk back. Informants choked every community. Crossing the border was impossible. And so, Israel's intelligence service designed something that required the complete abandonment of truth, a humanitarian organization that didn't exist, operating out of a country that would have executed anyone caught helping a Jew. All of it would run through one man's false name. He rented a cramped office in Tehran's central district and hung a brass plaque on the door, Red Crescent Agricultural Rehabilitation Program. The title looked legitimate enough to fool an Iranian clerk and vague enough to mean anything. Inside, a borrowed typewriter clicked out letters to provincial officials. New stamp, copied from an old medical charity template. New letterhead, freshly printed in Hebrew and translated twice to hide its origin. He practiced the accent in front of a mirror. French-educated, Swiss-born, raised in Lebanon. He spoke Farsi with deliberate hesitation, never enough to sound fluent. Never weak enough to appear foreign. Every inconsistency was designed, every imperfection rehearsed. He met with Colonel Bahrami from the Ministry of Forestry 2 days later. Bahrami was courteous, observant, and clearly measuring him. The colonel's first question was simple. Why marshlands? Foreigners prefer Tehran. Avner answered softly, almost apologetic, because that's where help is needed most. We teach villagers how to grow date palms in rehabilitated soils. The colonel smiled. Date palms are stubborn trees. Like secrets, they survive anywhere. Avner didn't breathe for a few seconds after that. He'd seen this before in the field, polite suspicion with a smile attached. Bahrami signed the paperwork and offered tea. The meeting ended without consequence. Yet, behind the civility, Avner felt the unease building. This man would not forget him. 2 weeks later, the first refugees arrived in Tehran on fake Iranian birth certificates. They were exhausted families who had walked across Shat al-Arab River Plains under cover of night, carrying nothing but blankets and fear. Each one received a new identity crafted inside that same office with its flickering fluorescent light. Avner memorized every name personally. He told them never to speak Arabic once they left the room. He could not use his real language with them. That became the first fracture in his carefully built world. The people he was saving could never know who he was. And the government whose hospitality he borrowed could never see what was happening in their own borderlands. One mispronounced word from any of them could burn the entire project to ash. Within a month, the organization grew from a desk and a typewriter to a network of vehicles and warehouses. Each permit, each invoice, each custom seal built another layer of fiction. Warehouse managers were bribed to stamp delivery papers for medical aid shipments that never existed. Truck drivers carried envelopes full of Iranian rials as bonuses for Red Crescent humanitarian overtime that was, in truth, silence money. Avner's real life shrank as his false life expanded. He avoided the Israeli contact point for months, fearing any extra movement could attract attention. Even Mossad started losing sight of him behind the forged bureaucracy he'd built. Then came the first sign that someone in Tehran had started asking questions. A letter arrived, addressed to Dr. A. Davidov, a name from one of his earliest forged documents. Only one person had ever seen that alias, the print shop owner who'd helped him design the stationery. The man had disappeared a week earlier. Avner burned the letter without opening it and ordered the next set of volunteers to use different office entry points. But the risk lingered. Somewhere inside the Iranian administration, his paper trail was colliding with itself. He visited Bahrami again to reinforce the illusion. Progress reports, Colonel. The marshland farms are thriving. Bahrami scanned the papers without expression. How many volunteers now? 24, all trained agricultural staff. Strange, the colonel said. Tehran airport lists only 12 arrivals. Avner had no answer ready. He smiled faintly, as if amused by an administrative mix-up, and said he would verify with his embassy. Then he stopped himself. The Swiss embassy, the one that had no record of him. He pivoted mid-sentence. Our field unit logs may not have reached the capital yet. Communication delay. The colonel only nodded. Conversation drifted to crops and rainfall. The tension never lifted. That night, Avner sat alone in his office counting forged identity cards. Every piece of paper connected to someone's survival and to his own execution if discovered. He realized the charity's growing success had created a new danger: bureaucracy. Each additional document was another chance for contradiction. He began reducing the operation's size on paper while secretly expanding its transport routes. A deception inside a deception. The fewer names the government saw, the safer the fiction looked. But fewer names meant slower evacuations. Families were waiting across the border, and each week brought new reports of arrests in Baghdad. He faced an impossible choice: preserve the illusion or speed up the rescues. Either could destroy both. By the end of that winter, the office ran almost too efficiently. Payments were processed, fuel allocations approved, permits reissued, all without him needing to intervene. His fabrications had become self-propelling. That should have made him confident. Instead, it made him afraid. If the system functioned without oversight, someone else must now be inside it. Someone other than him. He examined the newer approval letters and noticed small differences in the official seals. Each rotated a few degrees off-center, stamped with slightly different ink shades. Someone had begun replicating his forgeries. Was it another department trying to copy his model? Or had his control of the lie already slipped away? He thought of Bahrami again, asking about the missing volunteers, smiling but never forgetting. He thought of the families waiting in northern Iraq with counterfeit documents that could already be worthless. And then the newest permit arrived on his desk, authorizing another shipment of agricultural staff across the same border. The signature at the bottom matched Bahrami's perfectly, but the handwriting did not. For the first time in months, he did not know whether the paper in his hands was protecting him or leading him into a trap. Who inside Iran had just joined his operation, and whose side were they really on? The morning the third convoy prepared to leave Tehran, the clerks refused to release the trucks. Their orders had changed overnight. The Red Crescent agricultural program was now listed as inactive pending financial review. No one knew where the order had come from, or which ministry sent it. Eli Barzeev, still living as David Avner, sat behind his desk and reread the suspension letter a dozen times. The ministry stamp looked identical to previous ones, but the official seal was newer, sharper, freshly engraved. The bureaucracy he had spent months mastering had produced something he could not trace. His own phantom organization was now being handled by someone invisible. He tested a theory. He called the ministry office listed on the letter and asked for more information about the review. The clerk said the Red Crescent program did not exist on their registry at all. When he pressed harder, she asked for his identification number. He hung up before she could finish the question. Everything he had built, each layer of deception, each relationship now stood on a trapdoor. He found Bahrami that evening at a small tea house near the Ministry of Forestry. The colonel greeted him as warmly as always, shook his hand, and asked about the marshland project. Nothing seemed wrong until Avner mentioned the suspension letter. Bahrami frowned, unfolded it, and studied the signature. Soraya from the Agricultural Council? He asked. She was reassigned last year. This is not her hand. Then who signed it? Someone who wants you quiet for a while. Bahrami paused. We've had security revisions. The border patrol you use is under new command. Avner pushed deeper. Did they find something? Bahrami's expression darkened. You're not the only one with secrets here, Mr. Avner. Don't ask questions you can't survive answers to. That night, Avner locked himself in his office and went through every file. Each document told the same quiet warning: permits replaced with reissued versions, authorizations duplicated. The network had sprouted a ghost administrator. He drafted a coded message meant for his Mossad handler in Vienna, a charity frozen under false audit stop. possible exposure, request abort discretion. Then he hesitated. Abort meant leaving behind families mid-transit. Some already held fake papers bearing his forged stamps, the same ones now under question. If the operation stopped suddenly, those refugees would face interrogation at checkpoints with documents no longer matching ministry records. Saving himself meant condemning them. He kept the cable unsent. 2 days later, a message arrived instead. From Vienna. Same codebook, slightly altered phrasing. Audit procedural. Continue undercover expansion. Do not abort. He stared at it for a long time. The syntax was off. Vienna always used continue program operations, never cover expansion. He checked the signal prefix. It carried the correct authentication numbers, but the tone was wrong. Either Mossad headquarters had changed hands, or someone had forged their encryption key. He read the message again and again until dawn, unable to decide whether it was safety or bait. The next day, he found Bahrami waiting near his building. The colonel spoke quietly, as though choosing every word. "You should travel, Mr. Avner. Take some time away from the city." Avner tried to read the man's tone. Warning or trap? The review, is it serious? It depends who is reviewing and why. Bahrami inhaled slowly, eyes fixed on some distant fear. "Your volunteers ensure their paperwork matches the sealed manifests. Patrols now check authenticity under ultraviolet stamps." Avner's blood ran cold. Their stamps didn't contain UV markers. They had been crude imitations printed on rubber plates stolen from a shuttered NGO. Every convoy document would fail inspection instantly. That night, the drivers gathered in a safe house north of Tehran. Avner laid out the inspection change, his hands trembling. "We must rebuild every document. One mistake and you'll all hang." An older driver named Gilad spoke for the group. "We can't reprint everything in time. They're expecting departure within 3 days." Avner looked at the map spread across the table. Each border path marked, each checkpoint coded. "Then we can't move. We'll suspend until I verify the ministry records." A silence followed. One of the men shook his head. "Families already arrived in Khorramabad. If they wait, they get caught. Men there talk of new sweeps. We don't have time to wait." Avner pressed his palms against the table. "If we push now, they'll check the seals. They'll open the trucks. Then we pray they don't." The argument stretched through the night, the line between morality and survival blurring with every word. Mossad protocol stated clearly, abort if documentation resiliency failed. But Iran was closing its roads by the hour. Waiting meant exposure. Moving meant suicide. Avner found himself asking a question he'd never spoken aloud before. What do we owe them if they're already dead on paper? No one answered. When dawn came, the decision arrived from neither him nor the group. Bahrami appeared at the base gate, summoned him quietly, and handed over a new ministry travel permit, not for the Red Crescent, but for an export environmental study team. The permit listed 4 trucks. Same routes, same border, and approval signatures in proper sequence, complete, authentic, and official. Avner read it 3 times. "You arranged this?" Bahrami looked tired. "I arranged nothing. It came from higher authority. Someone wants your convoy to move." The colonel's eyes gave away uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Whoever sent this knows you're not who you say you are, yet they want you to continue. That single thought turned Avner's stomach. If someone knew his secret, then any moment could be his last. But if that someone was protecting him, refusing meant drawing attention. He nodded and said he would proceed. Still, when he returned to the office, he burned the earlier suspension order. Too many contradictions already, each one a fuse. As the next convoy departed, he traveled with them, not as a manager but as a low-level logistics officer. The uniforms were simple overalls with stitched red crescent patches already beginning to fray. Inside each truck, families huddled behind false walls of crates marked for soil analysis. On the second night of travel near Avaz, the lead truck broke down at a checkpoint newly established only days earlier. The guards demanded UV inspection. Avner claimed their equipment had already passed city customs, waving the new travel permit like armor. The senior inspector examined it carefully, nodding with apparent respect. "You have friends in the capital," he said slowly. Not many carry this kind of authorization. Avner forced a laugh. Our donors expect progress. And the inspector smiled faintly. Progress can be dangerous here. He folded the document, handed it back, and motioned them through. When the barriers lifted, Avner realized the impossible. The guard had recognized the document's forgery and waved them through anyway. That night, beside the desert highway, the drivers celebrated quietly. They thought their cover held. Avner didn't join them. He replayed every instant. The way the inspector avoided his eyes. The precise weight of the pause before saying, "Friends in the capital." It was not approval, it was signal. Someone was choosing who lived. For the first time, he doubted the entire premise of his mission. This wasn't deception as a weapon anymore, it was deception as a language he no longer spoke fluently. He stayed awake until morning, watching the border skyline flicker in headlights and sand dust. Each convoy mile carried more uncertainty than the one before. 3 weeks later, back in Tehran, a courier from Vienna arrived with a sealed diplomatic pouch, confirmation of ongoing funding. Avner unsealed it, expecting his usual packet of coded instructions. Instead, he found clippings from Iranian newspapers describing the charity's successful redeployment of agricultural aid. According to the reports, David Avner had just been awarded a commendation from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs for exceptional cross-border cooperation. Photographs printed alongside showed smiling Iranian officials shaking hands with him, photographs that had never been taken. He held the paper inches from his face. The background, the office, the officials, every detail authentic, except the man smiling next to them wasn't him. A perfect double. Mossad hadn't created that image, he hadn't, and the ministry hadn't. Someone had replicated his likeness, inserted it into public record, and given his legend life beyond his control. Everything he thought he controlled, the name, the face, the signature, belonged now to someone else. He sat motionless for a long time before reaching for the transmitter. Eventually, he stopped. What would he report? That his false identity was now a real person? That the lie had become official truth? The thought settled like a slow poison. If Mossad no longer crafted his cover, they might no longer command the operation. And if the Iranians had built this public version of Avner, they owned his survival. He caught himself thinking of Bahrami again, his subtle warnings, his silence about higher authority, the forged permits that sometimes protected him, sometimes trapped him. Maybe Bahrami wasn't just an ally bending rules for sympathy. Maybe he was part of whatever machine now sustaining the Phantom program. The courier waited for a receipt signature. Avner signed David Avner reflexively, but his hand faltered mid-stroke. For the first time, he realized he could no longer imitate his own forgery properly. The courier left without speaking. He paced the room, the paper still open on the desk. Two truths pulled at him like opposing magnets. Whoever created this life for him could expose him at will, and yet, without that creation, his mission collapsed. He typed a message he never sent, identity compromised, unsure who controls organization, recommend extraction. Then deleted it line by line. Extraction meant erasure, not just of him, but of the network. Dozens of lives built under his manufactured existence would vanish. He switched off the typewriter, sat in the dark, and listened to the tick of an old wall clock mocking his indecision. Midnight passed. Tehran breathed below his window. Somewhere out there, the man in the newspaper, the fake version of him, might be eating dinner, shaking hands, existing more convincingly than he ever had. And in that moment, Eli Barziv understood the final cost of deception. Once a lie outgrows its owner, truth isn't lost, it becomes irrelevant. He didn't know yet whether he was still the spy or already the cover story. He only knew one thing: none of this was under his command anymore. Eli Barziv stopped using the office. Someone else was clearly using the name, so he worked out of hotels and coffee houses, always paying in cash, always sitting near exits. He checked newspapers daily for another appearance of the Phantom David Avner. 2 more articles appeared that month praising the charity's success in stabilizing rural migration. The quotes attributed to him were fluent in Persian idioms he could never match. Whoever was behind it not only protected the fiction, they embodied it better. He told himself this was good. A deeper illusion meant greater safety. If the authorities accepted the public version, the real one could step back unseen, but that assumption quickly began to break. The more real the legend became, the less authority he had over its resources. Supplies vanished. Truck allocations changed. Volunteers he'd never met arrived, asking for instructions he hadn't issued. The network moved without him. He spent 1 week tracing financial flows through Tehran's Ministry of Trade. Receipts once sent to his office now bore a new contact address on Saadi Avenue. Same organization name, same letterhead, different subsignature, Regional Director D. Avner. He traveled there in disguise as an accounting consultant, pretending to review cooperative ledgers. Inside, he found an operation indistinguishable from his own. Desks aligned, stamps identical, even a portrait of him, or of someone very similar, hung on the wall. The secretary greeted him without recognition. "You're from the audit team?" He nodded, afraid to speak. In the inner room, the director sat with his back turned, dictating a report in crisp Farsi. The voice was younger, sharper, with an accent he couldn't place. When the man finally turned, Eli froze. The resemblance wasn't perfect, but close enough to deceive anyone at a distance. The same angular jaw, same clipped hairline. The copy looked like a propaganda version of him. "Mr. Avner?" the double said with mild impatience. "What division are you from?" Eli forced a neutral tone. "Vienna office. Performance revision." The double smiled faintly. "We've been expecting you." Every nerve in Eli's body screamed to flee, but he stayed, waiting to see how far the mirage extended. The man spoke with authority, outlining schedules for soil consultants departing Khoramabad. None of it matched current routes. Every plan corresponded with refugee groups he thought were already gone. When the meeting ended, the double shook his hand. "Tell headquarters we appreciate the expanded budget." Eli walked out under the weight of a deception so complete it no longer needed him to survive. Outside, rain slicked the pavements. He ducked into an alley and lit a cigarette he didn't finish. His mind raced through possibilities. Maybe Mossad had installed a substitute to secure continuity. Maybe Iranian intelligence had turned his legend into a sting operation. Both theories fit, which meant he could trust neither. That night, he sent a blind transmission. Duplicate network observed. Identity collision imminent. Require guidance. No response. He waited 2 days, then a week. Silence became its own answer. The 4th convey shipment was already scheduled, arranged through the new director's office. He had no say in it, no visibility. But every instinct warned him it wasn't rescue anymore, it was bait. Families would be rounded up mid-route and paraded as a proof of Israeli infiltration. His name would seal their guilt. He decided to intervene quietly. If this next convoy was compromised, he would abort it himself. He approached Bahrami. The colonel looked older, wearier, and listened without surprise as Eli described the duplicate office. "So, they finally decided to help you manage success," Bahrami said dryly. "Who did? You think I know?" Bahrami shrugged. "Perhaps your own people decided they couldn't trust one man in a foreign capital anymore. I never received notice of any shift. Perhaps you weren't meant to." Their eyes met. Neither trusted the other, yet some old thread of mutual survival bound them in the conversation. Bahrami tapped a cigarette ash into the tray. "I can't protect something that exists twice. Choose which one you want to be." The colonel slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a travel authorization for a medical supply truck leaving 2 days later, the same date as the supposed convoy run. "If you want to stop it," he said, "see it with your own eyes." Eli left without answering, but 2 nights later he boarded the medical supply truck in disguise, mixed among drivers who thought he was an Iranian logistics officer inspecting cargo. The desert road eastward glittered under a hard winter moon. 3 trucks followed, their walls lined with hollow compartments. Refugee families would be crammed inside those spaces. At the first checkpoint outside Avaz, the guards were unusually relaxed. They greeted the lead driver by name, even joked about the cold. Eli counted 8 soldiers, not the usual 3. He kept silent. Something about the ease felt wrong. False release. The absence of scrutiny was its own trap. When the barriers lifted without inspection, one of the other drivers laughed in relief. "See how smoothly it goes now?" The new permits work magic. Eli didn't reply. He looked at the lead truck's manifest. The stamp was identical to Bahrami's earlier signature. Precisely identical. Even the ink blot below the date was the same. A photocopy, not a fresh seal. Halfway to the border, the convoy stopped at a service shed to refuel. Eli stepped out under the stars, weighed the risk in silence. If he aborted now, the guards might assume mechanical trouble, but the refugees inside would suffocate if kept too long with vents closed. Proceeding might march them straight into exposure. Every instinct told him to stop. He climbed into the communications truck, lifted the mobile transmitter, and dialed Vienna's code prefix. The response tone came instantly, too instantly. No static, no delay. Whoever answered was local. He hung up. It was already too late to reroute. The convoy started again. Moments later, headlights appeared in the distance, an approaching patrol column. The younger driver panicked. What now? Eli said steadily, "Stay in line. Do nothing till they signal." The patrol vehicles closed in. The lead officer motioned them to the side. They stopped under a concrete checkpoint arch marked Health Quarantine Station. Uniforms looked unfamiliar. Civil defense, not army. A sergeant approached, clipboard in hand. "Medical convoy?" Eli nodded. "You're behind schedule. Show authorization." He passed him the envelope Bahrami had given. The sergeant examined it briefly, then called to his men. "Proceed. No inspection, no questions." Another false release. But Eli felt the unease return stronger than before. The sergeant's gesture of dismissal was too hurried, almost rehearsed. 20 kilometers beyond, a dust storm hit without warning. Visibility disappeared. The trucks slowed and separated, lights hazed into amber blurs. When the storm cleared, one truck was gone, the second in line, holding 32 people. They waited an hour. Nothing. The young driver wanted to return. Eli hesitated. Returning meant doubling back through the new checkpoints, where any inconsistency would invite arrest. Continuing meant abandoning those families possibly broken down or captured. Abort meant killing hope for all. Proceed meant maybe condemning half. He ordered the convoy forward. By dawn, they reached the border zone near Deloran. Tired soldiers waved them through. The desert beyond seemed endless, empty. For the first time in days, tension drained from his shoulders. Maybe the missing truck found another route out. Maybe the double network, whoever ran it, ensured transition safely. A fragment of belief returned, like sunlight after long confinement. He allowed himself to think of home, of finishing this nightmare, of being Eli again. But when they halted at the extraction point, a narrow ravine used for offload, he saw the truth. The receiving party waiting there wasn't Mossad extraction unit. The vehicles bore emblems of Iran's state security. The illusion of freedom evaporated in heartbeat. The convoy had crossed not into safety, but into controlled territory prepared for its arrival. He understood then the missing truck wasn't lost. It was bait, used to confirm the final route. Every step had been allowed, every signature pre-approved, because someone wanted the network complete before the reveal. He shouted for the drivers to turn back. Engines sputtered. Figures with flashlights approached. No gunfire, no violence, just deliberate containment. They were surrounded without confrontation. A uniformed officer approached with paperwork already in hand. "Mr. Avner," and he said calmly, "your assistance in this transfer is appreciated. Our ministry thanks you for successful coordination." Eli stood mute. He looked at the document in the man's hands. Official commendation signed Regional Director D. Avner. His own name authenticating his own undoing. The system had swallowed him whole. The officer gestured toward the convoy. "You may continue your humanitarian duties. Tehran expects full reports by next week. No arrests, no accusations, just acknowledgement." They knew and didn't care. As the trucks moved again under escort, Eli sat in the cabin, shivering despite the heat. The near abort had been the last moment of real choice. Everything after belonged to someone else's script. His previous assumption, that exposure meant end, was wrong. Exposure had become the cover itself. They needed the fake charity alive for reasons beyond him. He glanced out toward the horizon. Another checkpoint waited ahead, gates wide open, lights green. Here was the final paradox. a safe passage that wasn't safety at all. For the refugees inside, it would look like deliverance. For him, another chamber of the lie. The convoy rolled on, engines steady, faces invisible behind slats and shadows. Somewhere inside, a child coughed, soft, persistent, unaware that the man in charge was no longer the man they thought could save them. The border lights receded behind them. Iran disappeared into the dark. For the first time since the mission began, Eli felt nothing, no fear, no triumph, only the hollow certainty that he was being used by forces transparent and opaque at once. The trucks had continued toward a horizon that refused to end, and he wondered if the greatest mistake hadn't been forging a name, but believing a lie could ever be retired once it had learned to speak for itself. For now, he stayed silent. The convoy moved, and around every mile marker, uncertainty multiplied like heat in the desert air. The convoy never returned to Tehran under its own authority. Within 48 hours, the Red Crescent Agricultural Rehabilitation Program was formally dissolved by internal memorandum. No raids, no arrests, only polite administrative deletion. The file number vanished from ministry archives. The mail slot at the office building was sealed shut. Eli Barzeev, still carrying papers naming him David Avner, received an official notice. His work visa was rescinded due to completion of mission objectives. No explanation, no accusation, just bureaucratic termination of a life that had never legally existed. He understood what was happening even before the embassy rumors reached him. The duplicate network, the mirror operation, had been absorbed into Iranian state infrastructure under a new name. The smugglers, families, and contacts he'd trusted were being reassigned as documented refugees repatriated through official cooperation channels. The deception had become policy. He spent a final morning on the balcony of his flat watching Tehran's traffic. The city pulsed normally, unbothered, as if his disappearance had already been anticipated. His phone rang once, no voice, only the faint click of a line being monitored. When he whispered, "Is anyone there?" The call ended. He tried sending one last coded transmission through the shortwave unit hidden in a battered suitcase. Operation submerged. "I am irrelevant." No answer came, only static that merged with city noise. Late that afternoon, Bahrami reappeared unannounced. His uniform jacket hung open, eyes shadowed by exhaustion or something deeper. "They're giving you a flight out," the colonel said quietly. "Tonight." "Who arranged it?" "Same office that created you, I suppose. I was never their citizen. No one said you were. It's easier that way." They sat without talking. For months, they'd balanced between alliance and suspicion. Now that both sides had outlived their usefulness, there was nothing left to protect. Before leaving, Bahrami placed a sealed envelope on the table. "It's not for me," he said, "but read it only after you cross the water." Then he added, almost to himself, "Lie too long, and the lie starts lying back." That night, inside the dim hull of a small transport plane leaving Mehrabad under diplomatic clearance, Eli opened the envelope. Inside was a clipped telegram dated a month earlier, signed with the Vienna authentication phrase, "Continue undercover expansion," and beneath it, a handwritten note in English. "The message you doubted was genuine. We issued it. Tehran compromised at high levels. We maintained network continuity through alternate channel. Do not attempt personal extraction. You are presumed absorbed." He stared at the page until the ink blurred. Presumed absorbed. The phrase tasted clinical, final. It meant headquarters already considered his identity consumed by the operation's fabric. He was no longer expected to debrief, only to vanish quietly within the anonymity he'd built. The plane banked low over the Caspian. Iranian airspace dropped away. Somewhere below, the last convoy survivors were being cataloged and processed as state-sanctioned immigrants. Safe, perhaps, but at a cost neither they nor he could name. He closed his eyes, tried to reconstruct the line where moral intent ended and machinery began, but it had dissolved months earlier when he chose not to abort. Months later, Mossad analysts pieced together fragments of the Tehran structure. What emerged was less a leak than a convergence. Iranian intelligence had discovered the smuggling route early and decided not to expose it. Instead, they used it to quietly remove a minority population that had become an internal problem, staging every movement as neutral humanitarian transit. Israel thought it was rescuing. Iran thought it was evacuating. Both pretended the other was unaware. Each bureaucracy needed the other's fiction to perform virtue without admission. The forged charity, born in secrecy, evolved into an unspoken partnership between enemies. Papers crossed ministries with signatures from opposite sides, and nobody asked how they fit. That mutual blindness saved hundreds, but created an intelligence precedent no one could admit publicly. Within Mossad, evaluators argued whether to classify Operation Avner as success, compromise, or failure. Officially, it never happened. Unofficially, its methods became training doctrine, the case study of a deception that outgrew its purpose. Recruits were told the legend, cover identities must remain temporary, or they become unpredictable ecosystems. The file carried no human names, only a warning in bold font, identity replication risk Tehran example. Inside Iran, the episode left quieter scars. Colonel Bahrami was transferred to a desk job in Isfahan, where he spent his final years managing soil reports he suspected were entirely fabricated. When he retired, the state newspaper announced him as veteran of international cooperation. He died a year later, buried with full honors. The ghost of David Avner continued. Bureaucrats filled out forms under that signature for at least another decade. Cargo shipments, agricultural projects, day border health permits, all carried the rubber stamp of a man who no longer existed. The forgery became self-maintenance. No single official wanted to delete a name tied to foreign investment records. Paper immortality. From logistical perspective, the deception succeeded perfectly, routes stabilized, attrition minimized. From human viewpoint, it contaminated every layer of trust. Operatives learned to question even authentic channels. During later operations, field agents hesitated before following internal orders, wondering whether their signals came from headquarters or from another alternate channel. The institution won efficiency and lost innocence. In Tel Aviv's training wing, analysts still quoted the Tehran file. "The enemy who helps you lie," one instructor repeated, "is the one you'll answer to forever." Eli resurfaced in Vienna under diplomatic cover arranged by the same network that had disowned him. Officially, he was a mid-level attaché from the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture, seconded for trade conferences. Unofficially, he was a living redundancy, too useful to discard, too contaminated to re-employ. He spent months attending empty meetings, drinking in cafes, writing reports that no one read. When he tried to request reintegration into field service, the reply was a single line: operational contamination unresolved, clearance indefinite hold. He realized they didn't distrust his loyalty. They distrusted his clarity. Too many years trapped between identities had blurred which reality he served. Once, an old handler from Europe's section found him sitting by the Danube. "They still talk about Tehran," the man said. "Not the part you think. They talk about the system you built. Do you remember when you said the easiest thing to fake was courage?" Eli nodded slowly. "You were right," the handler said, "but that's not what broke you. What broke you was believing courage could survive perpetual pretending." He never answered. He lived in Vienna another 5 years, always under different diplomatic postings, always signing a version of his old alias. Each document extended his unreal existence by months. On paper, he was still a functioning bureaucrat. In person, he had become a shadow, fluent in no language without a trace of accent. He never heard again from Bahrami or from the network that absorbed his operation. But every now and then, humanitarian press briefings mentioned the continuing success of Iran's Regional Agricultural Rehabilitation Partnership, a rebranded echo of the entity he'd invented. Seeing the name gave him a fleeting, bitter consolation. The lie lived on, but at least it carried seeds of what he'd meant to do. At night, he sometimes dreamt of the last convoy, dust storm glowing bronze, trucks moving through half-seen patrol lights, the false release, the mistaken safety, the quiet understanding that came too late. He woke before the horizon ended, always before the truth arrived. A decade later, a code review committee in Tel Aviv declassified partial transcripts of Operation Avner for internal study. They discovered that the Tehran communication relay, which forwarded Eli's final transmissions, had, in fact, been rerouted through an Iranian signals proxy built by Israeli technical advisors years earlier. It meant the entire dialogue between field and headquarters had always passed through foreign monitoring before encryption. The intelligence community called it an architecture oversight. Eli would have called it inevitability. A few among the next generation of officers argued to preserve the paradox instead of correcting it. Shared invisibility, one theorist wrote, may be the most stable form of peace between enemies who cannot afford treaties. For them, the deception was no longer a mistake but a model, manipulation not to deceive the other side, but to formalize ignorance in both directions. None of that ever reached Eli. By then, he had stopped seeking meaning in institutional logic. His final years were spent teaching language assimilation for covert service recruits, the irony not lost on him. When one student asked whether maintaining multiple identities changed a person, he paused before answering. "It doesn't change you," he said. "It replaces you in slow motion." The student smiled, thinking he was being poetic. The official histories never record his death date. In Israeli archives, an administrative memo still lists Avner, David, status, on assignment, his falsified existence continuous, unexpired. And somewhere in Tehran's digital registry, at the same name authorizes budget renewals for rural rehabilitation projects. Both systems feed each other's illusion, oblivious to the shared ghost connecting their code lines. The deception never ended, it only learned endurance. Readers, watchers, analysts, you can call it mastery or you can call it corrosion. Either way, someone still signs for it every year. Who signs your truths today and how long before their ink becomes yours?